Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. Welcome. This is part of Think Productive's free webinar series, and our topic for today is how to have the energy, nutrition to boost your brain. Colette has the first world exclusive physical copy. I don't even have one yet. I'm jealous. Mine is, I think, on a DHL text message about 5:15 this afternoon, and I'm going to be out, so I may never see
They prioritise me, as I
Who
said.
knows?
I mean, what can I say,
So you
Graham?
got yours already.
Really sorry about that, But...
So let me just explain about this partnership for this webinar. So I'm Graham. I'm the founder of Think Productive and also the co-author of this new book, How to Have the Energy. And I'm delighted to introduce Colette, who over the last few years has been first, I guess, a colleague who I was just aware of her work, and she was aware of my work. Then she was my nutrition coach for a period of time. And through that work, I just completely revolutionized my own energy levels. I stopped having that 4 p.m. slump in the afternoon. And I was convinced that this was a good thing, and Colette was onto something. And so then lastly, Colette has become my co-author for this book, How to Have the Energy. So Colette, introduce yourself and your work to us.
Yeah, so hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to the next 45 minutes or so with you. I am the founder of Optimum Living. I'm a nutritionist. Optimum Living is a wellbeing consultancy, and what we do is we work with large businesses, teams, organizations, and also individuals. But in combination to that, I've worked with a number of charities and smaller businesses, and also some professional sports teams as well. But the key thing within all of my work is energy. We have to have this vital element in order to live our lives as vital as we want to. And so anything that I do, I'm always looking at how we can harness that. And whether today you've told us that you're frazzled, or whether that you're feeling quite chilled and quite energized, we always know that there's small upgrades that we can do that's going to transform that. So my work is all around that, but it's not how I started. I actually started my career with a degree in IT. So very, very different start, not a nutritionist, not a yogi, not this kind of foodie person. And I was managing a global sales team, traveling the world a lot. And I have to say, fell through a lot of pitfalls along the way and started to feel the consequences. My energy was massively zapped. I was still delivering on the numbers, but I definitely wasn't delivering on personal friendships, on my family. And I found myself cancelling more and more things just to actually recover from the working week. And I guess you get to a point where you think, what sacrifice am I making here? And I remember there's one particular day where I was just so tired at the weekend, and I just knew that something had to change. There's more of this in the book about our personal stories, but it started me on a new journey in order to actually improve my own energy. And as I did that, I took a few colleagues along with me that were around me saying, well, what are you doing? And in the end, I resigned from my role and went back to university. And here I am 10 years later doing this role. I'm working with lots of people that were just like me. And I think the real key of what Graham and I deliver about energy is the application piece, because there's so much knowledge out there, especially around nutrition, especially this time of year, when everybody's thinking about festive stuff and, thinking about the new year and new you and that kind of thing. And it's about kind of how do we actually make this stuff happen? So much information, but the application is the magic. That's the momentum. Let's make it happen. We have some simple strategies to share with you today.
Yeah, so I'll briefly just tell the story of the book. So as I mentioned before, Colette and I started working together. How that would work? Well, actually, the original question was interesting. Is I had a little while where I was really struggling with energy, feeling quite depressed, very, very low moods. And because I knew Colette, I just sent her an email one day saying, hey, what vitamins do I need to take to make me feel better? And I think, like many of us, I just instinctively went for this kind of sort of, how do I take a pill to fix this kind of solution? And of course, Colette came back saying, actually, let's have a bigger conversation about your food and what you're eating. And so I reluctantly said, yeah, okay, you can become my nutrition coach. And I sent Colette photos of every single meal on WhatsApp for about 6 months. And what was interesting was Colette's responses. So often she would say, that's great, you're doing really well, high five, sending me little emojis back on WhatsApp. Or that's great, but can you switch this ingredient for that ingredient? So do the same thing, cook the same stuff, but just upgrade this one ingredient. And some of those small changes made big differences. I would say that I probably spend fewer hours of my week cooking than I even used to, but actually my energy levels are so much higher. So what was interesting to me was that it wasn't about me having to do tons more effort to make this happen. It was actually just about being more savvy and having some good habits and really thinking about food and the strategies around food just that little bit more than I was. So we wrote it all up in this book, How to Have the Energy. What was really interesting was how many of the elements of how to make good diet stick were actually very similar to how to make good productivity stick. So in my role as chief productivity ninja, original ninja, there are certain aspects of that book, How to Be a Productivity Ninja, in terms of the characteristics that are actually very similar to things that we're talking about in this book. So if you're a fan of that book, you'll recognize here things like ninja preparedness, the human not superhero element, obviously, and being label savvy. So being savvy with labels and food and the knowledge around that, just as with productivity, we talk about being weapon savvy. So there are some real parallels and similarities. And ultimately that's because a lot of this is really about habits. And a lot of us know instinctively what would be good to eat versus what would be bad to eat. We know not to eat too much sugar. We know not to, indulge too much in sweet treats and so on. But there's a gap between what we know and what we actually do. And so for me, that's, what became the most interesting part of this book is that, yes, there's recipes. Yes, there's all the kind of science-backed nutrition geekiness. But actually what's most important is, how do we make this happen? How do we make this real in people's busy day-to-day lives? Do you want to say anything more about the high energy plan there, Colette?
Yeah, so I think what it is trying to kind of bottling it down to just some simple strategies that we can apply, because even though, as I said, it doesn't have to be difficult applying these things, it does have to be consistent. So there is no hack, there is no biohack, there is no pill for energy. It's consistently showing up for yourself and investing in yourself on a day-to-day basis most of the time, So, doing it once is not the important thing. It's kind of, doing it for one whole week, fully committed to this new keto diet, perhaps that's something that you've tried, or one of the other crazy ones that are out there at the moment. I'm not saying keto is necessarily completely crazy, but it's quite a regime. Then you can't, it really makes it really hard to be sustainable. So just think about consistency. It is on there as well. But that was when we were putting the strategies together, it was like little sound bites that you can have in your mind. So the mindset shifts to there. So what we want to do within this time is, there's 9 there, and that's going to take us a lot of time to go through. So what we've chosen is to go through around 5 of them to give you an insight into these strategies. And we're going to talk you through those now. I think that's...
Yes. And then I should also say that we'll leave some time at the end for questions. So if anyone's on the call saying, hey, I really need to find out about this particular thing that I'm eating or not eating, and you want some advice from Colette, then do put those in the Q&A, put it in the chat, and we will get to those questions towards the end as well. So let's talk about one of the first parts of this high energy plan, and that is the idea of choosing how you want to feel. So I think often we choose our foods for a variety of other reasons. So we choose food that we just know is going to taste nice, particularly that food that we feel tempted by. We might choose food just to be functional. We're just, we're hungry. We need to plug that gap before we get to the next meeting or the next meal or the next thing. And sometimes we choose food for emotional reasons too, right? So it's like, oh, I really want that, sausage, chips and beans because it reminds me of being at my mum's house and being young or whatever. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why we make the decisions that we do around food. But what I found was most interesting to me working with Colette was she really encouraged me to think about food through the lens of energy. And almost like when I look at food now, I think about what's going to be the positive energy from this, what's going to really support, me and my brain and my body right now. So, when you look at food, really think about it in those terms. Think about it in terms of what's the best bang for my buck here? What's the best choice that I can make that's going to allow me to feel great? And, part of that is recognizing that certain foods have consequences, right? So we know that if we drink too much coffee or we eat too much sugar, we're going to crash. Or
fizzy Vimto, like one of our
fizzy
attendees.
Vimto, yeah, indeed. And that's not to say that, and we'll get onto this, that we shouldn't have any of those things, or we should cut out sugar completely and be totally, evangelical about and puritanical about these things. There's definitely something to be said for a little bit of what you fancy. But just looking at your general choices around food through this lens of how do I choose the things that are going to give me high energy and support me to have high energy? And there's some knowledge involved in that, and there's also some practicalities involved in that too. So the first practicality I want to really encourage everybody here to focus on is lunch. And we're just in that post-lunch moment now. Some of you may be on this call eating your lunch. So a couple of things to say about lunch is, over the years, and I think this really developed around the film Wall Street with Michael Douglas, and the famous catchphrase in there, "Lunch is not for wimps."
It was the 80s. It was a very long time ago, Graham.
Yeah, so this catchphrase, "Lunch is for wimps," was made famous in this film, and the idea was, don't take time for lunch, just carry on, work all the way through to 5 o'clock. Like, there's so much to do. You don't have time to stop and have lunch. It's a very macho way of thinking. So we flip this around. Lunch is not for wimps. And there's some really important things to say about lunch. One of them is that the choices that you make around how you eat are as important as what you eat. So getting away from your desk, ditching the al desco, as we talk about in the book, and really creating space to be calmer, less stressed as you eat. That will actually mean that what you're eating gives you more energy, because the body finds it easier to digest and to convert that food and nutrition into energy when you're in a calmer state. If you're in that slightly more adrenaline-based, fight or flight-based state, it's actually much more difficult to digest and to get the value from that food.
Yeah, there's a real science around that we share in the book, which is ultimately when you're in any sort of even a low level of stress, your body literally cannot digest food, so it'll just shelve it for later, which usually results in things like a brain fog, slump in energy, feeling a bit bloated mid-afternoon. So taking the time out is a real investment in your afternoon. So just want to share a graph here. It's the only graph that we have, and it's from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And it was a piece of research where they followed a number of judges for around 1,000 hearings. And these judges were having to either grant bail, or actually keep people imprisoned. So it was basically a parole board. And at the start of the day, you can see here that the number of people that were granted bail was just over 60%. So that actually was quite a favourable amount of people that were, being let out of prison. And you may think that some of the common denominators in bail being granted or not may be that you have a good case, perhaps you have a really good lawyer, or you've got a great track record, and it's really compelling. But actually, the biggest common denominator that came out of this was, when did the judge last eat? So if you look at the start, as I said, over 60% of the prisoners were granted bail, but as it got closer to lunch, this actually went down to 0. And there's a survival technique that kind of kicks in. The more hungry we get, the blood sugar levels drop. We go into this survival kind of mechanism, if you think about fight or flight. And during that time, what we're trying to maintain is low risk. So we don't want to do anything that's going to risk too much for us, because we just don't have the decision-making capacity at that point. So obviously the low risk option for these judges was just to put these poor prisoners back into prison. And they would have lunch break, and guess what? After this short break, they would come back, they'd have eaten, they'd have had a break from hearing all of these proceedings, and the approval ratings for parole went up again, and they gradually dropped off towards the end of the day until they had another break. So you can see here how really telling this piece of data is. And one of the reasons I wanted to include it in the book was just, wow, our judgment is so impaired by when we last ate and how we ate. You know, having that break, having some food in the middle of the day. And recent times has meant that a lot more people are working from home than ever before. And for some, that's invited an opportunity to prepare a fresh meal. But for others, that's actually meant that they've just worked straight through their lunch, or literally had something just on their desk because perhaps their desk is the dining room table. So I really, really implore you to, if you are working from home, like both Graham and I are, that you do change your space for meals, that you do stop to have lunch. It makes a massive difference to your judgment. And, you know, there could be lots of low risk decisions that you're making, and you're missing out on big opportunities in your life. So it's so important to take lunch.
Yeah, and just, you know, just to back that up, so making the effort with your lunch, not only to eat something good and to make that time, but to create the space to sit and eat quietly, you know, watch something on YouTube, but just get away from looking at emails and thinking about work and being preoccupied with that stress. So you have to really make the effort to do that and create that space to make it happen.
I mean, my gold standard is no devices, so no YouTube. So if we're wanting to really get optimal digestion, you know, we just want to actually focus on the food. Use it as.
But YouTube's better than email, right?
Well, it depends what you're watching, I guess.
I watch
you
comedies.
never know if this ad's going to be there that you'll never follow, and before you know it, you've forgotten what you've eaten. So my gold standard is always no devices. Focus on the food. Use it as a short mindfulness practice in the middle of the day, and enjoy what you're eating. Maybe read the paper. Something like that, you know.
Read the paper. How old are you, Colette?
Read a magazine, or, you know, just put something that's not digital.
Yeah, for sure.
Is the point.
One of our other elements of the high energy plan is don't eat food with its own jingle. So when you think about foods, all the foods that are good for us, do they need marketing plans? Are there jingles for carrots and broccoli and stuff like that?
Whole PR teams.
Yeah, whereas all these foods that are more manufactured, they need huge, well-resourced marketing plans to convince us to eat them. There's a good reason for that. What we need to focus on is food made by, we need to get away from the food made in plants and eat more food that is made from plants. And so don't eat food with its own jingle. Try and not be swayed by some of the very pernicious marketing messages. I have quite a lot of these conversations with my family where my mum is always swayed by these labels and gimmicks on the front of packaging that says things like 20% less sugar or reduced fat. And it's like, well, there's a reason for that, which is that it was made with far too much sugar before. And so that's, you know, the way of selling it. And actually fat isn't necessarily a bad thing, which we'll get onto in a moment as well. So it's kind of been seen as the energy. Actually, sugar is a much bigger enemy in all of this. So just being aware of marketing, being aware of the fact that all of those messages are not designed to help you. They're designed to persuade you. They're designed to change your behavior. And so you've got to be really careful about what some of those things really mean and the real value of some of that marketing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's so rife that we just walk in and we're just being manipulated by all these really clever marketing companies as soon as we look at a packet of food. And yet, so really the takeaway is if it needs the whole marketing team, then you probably don't want to be eating it regularly. So perhaps after here, there's a little bit of an action you can take away. Go and have a look in the cupboard and see how many of the items that you're regularly buying does have one of those teams, does have a jingle. Maybe you can hear the song in the background in your head. And there's a question to see if you could perhaps.
Yeah, Matthew's saying that Aldi has Kevin the Carrot. So there's an exception to every rule. I've never heard of Kevin the Carrot, and I do shop at Aldi.
Yeah, I have seen it, but I think he's more mainstream kind of promotion of Aldi rather than, you know, the
you
whole
should eat carrots. Like, that's not the point, right?
Yeah, it's not you should eat Aldi carrots. No, but yeah, but still, yeah, it's a good point.
So what should we eat then, Colette?
The rainbow. So a carrot actually is a great place to start. So eating the rainbow is something that I'm seeing more of in the media, and I think that's a great thing because it is really encouraging people to eat more colourful foods, natural colourful foods. So we're thinking about those plants again, and also thinking about roughly half of the plate being these colourful foods too. And the reason for that is it's so plentiful. I'll just summarize maybe 2 or 3 of these. So the first thing is each color has a different gift for your brain, body, health, metabolism, stress levels. So the color profiles contain different antioxidants and different nutrient complexes. So these are all going to give you a plethora of different supportive ingredients. So you don't need to be a food scientist to know this. You just need to be looking for the different colors. Think about like your beetroot, that bright purple color. That's got things called beta cyanins in there, which is really, really good for our blood pressure. If you think about tomatoes, which are most amazing crop that we don't really think about, they're usually pretty cheap to buy. They have another incredibly powerful antioxidant called lycopene, which is so good for our brain health. So you don't need to know all of those real specifics, although there's a little bit more in the book. But what you need to be doing is thinking about how can you rainbow up your plate. And Graham spoke about when him and I worked together initially on WhatsApp. He would send me a plate of food and I'd say, okay, can you rainbow that up a little bit? Can you add some cherry tomatoes? Can you maybe put a handful of green leaves in there? What about some radishes? That's a great one for this time of year. And for Matthew, no, when we're talking about rainbow, we don't mean Skittles. So the answer to that one anyway.
And that was the thing, because one of the things I sent you on WhatsApp once was a plate of salad, and it was all green. And there was me thinking, I was, feeling really smug and thinking I'd made all the right decisions. And you were like, actually, can we put some yellow peppers or some beetroot or some tomatoes in? It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's the whole rainbow thing, right? So even when you have a really healthy plate, you can upgrade that, make that even better by increasing that diversity of nutrition from different colors of food.
And we may be on the run, okay? So we may be running through a train station, probably not so much on the run at the moment, but even then, going in like the Pret or wherever you're picking up a sandwich. And there's always a side that you can add some color. So if you just want a sandwich, maybe there's some colorful things that you can take with you, like a little pot of spinach and tomatoes, or maybe you go for the salad option, or even a soup. A soup is the most amazing rainbow way of doing this thing as well. So you don't have to always have cold things. These can be warm. Curries, casseroles, stews are just the most amazing way to pack in lots of different colors, and they can just be in one dish.
And Sarah's saying on there, does sweet potato count as eating the rainbow? Well, yeah, that's definitely a good color. And then the rainbow is about mixing that with some other good plant food as well, which leads us on to the high energy plate. So what we wanted to do in the book was, really focus on a simple, memorable way that we could start to think about our food, particularly back to that idea of the lens of how do we want this to make us feel. And so what we've got here is really the prescription either for any meal in terms of making it as plentiful of energy as possible, or just thinking about your day. So you might not, with every meal, be hitting these ratios of 50, 25, 25. But if you know that that's the plan over the course of the day, you can use that to kind of correct course a little bit, be a bit more plant-based in the afternoon if you've been a bit more meat-based in the morning or at lunchtime, and so on and so forth. So the idea with this is that 50% of what we eat should be rainbow plants. We talk particularly in the book about some VIPs, so very important plants, that a couple of which Colette just mentioned there, beetroot, and we talk about broccoli and blueberries and many other things like that. So 50% of what we eat should be that rainbow plant food. 25% of what we eat should be proteins, good protein foods, and then 25% smarter carbs. So Colette will go into a little bit more detail on those. But you can use that as a way to look at the plate in front of you and just really think about, have I got those ratios right? Often what that means for me is that, I've gone a bit too heavy on the carbs part of it, and it's about putting more plants in to redress that balance, reducing the carb intake there. And you'll notice that we're not saying carbs are bad or that we shouldn't eat carbs. This is very, I think, very damaging viewpoint that we often read about in particularly, women's magazines and sort of aspects of the media and the Daily Mail online, which is like
men's health a lot more,
and men's health too. Yeah, like this whole like no carbs till marbs thing and all of that. And it's just like, it's just really damaging to put this kind of pressure on a food stuff that's actually really important. And you actually need carbs to help you get the best benefits from your protein as well.
Actual energy. And so we're talking about energy here. So anybody that's on this session that has cut out carbs will feel the lull that you have from, I mean, we can, first of all, it's really hard to cut out carbs completely because they're in everything to a certain level. They're in vegetables, and they're a lot in fruits. They're in some things that we'd think were actually just whole protein. So it's really hard to cut them out. So it's not even scientifically correct when we say that we are. So what we're doing is reducing them, but what we will feel straight away is a lull in our energy because our brain lives off glucose. So our brain just suddenly goes, and it takes a while to come back. And so, straight away, it's just something that's very, very difficult and unsustainable in my eyes for most people to live that way. So please do incorporate them. Smarter carbs just means that less of the processed stuff. Think white and beige, less of the beige and less of the white stuff. So the processed breads, white pasta, pastries, that kind of stuff.
And then there's 3 things that we've got on the right-hand side of the page there in terms of things not to forget. So fats and oils. We don't mention that in the plate itself, but they are important not to forget about as well. Drizzling olive oil is just, really good for us, particularly good for our hearts. And then cooking more with either butter or with coconut oil. And part of the reason not to be cooking too much with olive oil, you can cook with olive oil, if you're roasting and things like that. But if you're frying things at very high temperatures, then olive oil actually changes its molecular structure. And what happens with olive oil at very high heats is that it actually becomes more difficult to digest. It's harming you rather than helping you, making it harder for you to get good nutritional value. So that was just one of those really interesting things that I learned. And that's affected my cooking habits in terms of cooking a bit more with butter and just being mindful of when to use olive oil versus when to not.
And also, I think a lot of people have a lot of vegetable oils in their cupboards. As part of the book, we do a kitchen detox. And one of the first things that goes is the vegetable oils. So things like sunflower oil, because these things, they're not cold pressed in 99% of situations. So it means that they've been really heated at high temperatures and hydrogenated, creating a trans fat, which is like an anti-nutrient within the body. And at some point in our lives, we switched from these beautiful natural state fats into these trans fats and was told that was the right thing to do. So thinking like margarine and sunflower oil and that kind of stuff, it really has no place in our energy.
Yeah, and then obviously fermented foods. So thinking about things like kefir and kimchi, really important for supporting gut bacteria, which again helps you to digest the food choices that you are making in a better way. And hydration. So of course, drinking enough water. And we've actually got a diagram around hydration that's really helpful. It's called taking the pee. And basically the best way to know if you're hydrated is just to look at your wee. When you go to the toilet, and you want to have it in a very light yellow color. We've got a little color chart on the website to help with that. So if you want to know more about your wee, go to howtohavetheenergy.com. You'll find more there. Let's talk very quickly about the 5 ingredient rule and the idea of being label savvy. And then we're going to open up for some questions.
So how often do you actually take the food item that you're buying and look at the ingredients? Look at that list and scan it for things. I think if you're doing it often, then possibly the thing that you're looking at most is calories. And human beings don't really burn calories in the same way that we've been sold that we do. So it's potentially not leading you down a good path. And if you're just buying single ingredients, which is the way to go, things like porridge oats or the carrots or the broccoli or an egg, they don't have to have an ingredient list because they are just single ingredient foods. But the things that do, these are where we need to be more savvy, especially if we're buying them more often, because often there's things in there that we definitely don't recognize as food. They're usually long chemical names, and this kind of stuff is going to give you the idea that this has been made in labs, definitely not in kitchens. So designed in labs and made in plants, and never touched by a chef or a cook, or no matter what is on the label. And so, yeah, a quick rule of thumb is if you are going to be buying stuff with ingredients, 5 ingredients is a good way to approach it. And then as soon as we start to get more and more ingredients within that, and especially if we don't understand them and we're eating it regularly, it's likely that it's zapping our energy. And just one final thing about labels. But essentially, the first ingredient is the main ingredient. So if in the first 2 or 3 ingredients sugar is in there, it means that there's going to be containing a whole host of sugars within there. So just remembering that that's the first thing on the labels, are the most plentiful within the product.
So that's our high energy plan. We are going to open it up for questions in a second. So just leaving that there just as a little summary. So we've talked about very briefly a few of those 9 elements of the plan, and just bringing that back really to the fact that it's all about habits. It's all about how we really design our lifestyles, design our fridges and our cupboards and everything else to support good habits. I remember me sending a really pathetic lunch to Colette at one point, and she sent me back this really beautiful, rainbow filled kind of Buddha bowl of salad and everything. And I was like, oh, well, I've been really busy. And Colette said, well, you eat so have I, but you eat really good food when you've got good food in your fridge. And that was such a light bulb for me, that a lot of this is just about preparedness and doing the right things, in terms of the way we shop and the way we prepare, in a way that supports those good eating habits. So I'll open up for questions in a minute. Just a couple of things to say is that obviously we'd love you to go and buy the book. And also, if you know of people who might be interested, we're doing one final webinar for December next week. So do spread the word. There's still seats available for that one. Do sign people up. The book is available right now to pre-order. You can either get it from bookshop.org or from Amazon. So bookshop.org is a UK-based website, new website that's supporting local bookshops. And if you are able to get out and about, depending on where you are, then please do go and buy it from a real bookshop. That helps us as well as helping the bookshops.
Yeah, so in terms of what's next with us, if you are interested by any things that we said, Graham and I both work with businesses, organizations, teams, and also individuals. So keynotes, workshops, one-to-one consultations is the bulk of our work. And if you, please buy the book, just mention it again, just casually. We also have podcasts. Graham's long-standing podcast of Beyond Busy, which is brilliant, loads of episodes now. Which episode are you up to, Graham?
We're fast approaching 100 actually. We're actually in the middle of preparing Beyond Busy 100 as a sort of compilation of best bits from the first 100 episodes.
It's great. It's great.
And someone called Colette Heneghan's on there. I don't know if you've heard her.
I've been on it twice.
Coming up.
So just so you know, it's I'm the only one that's been on twice.
Yeah, indeed. Also, I do this thing on a Sunday evening, which is called Rev Up for the Week. I'll be talking a bit more about food on that list over the next few weeks. But basically, it's me putting a productive or a positive thought into your inbox every Sunday night. So if you want to sign up for that, just go to grahamallcott.com. And then Think Productive, the host of these webinars, have a couple of other things coming up. So obviously the book itself, it hits the shelves in bookshops on Boxing Day, but as I say, you can pre-order it online. I'm also doing this thing in January called the Kindness Happening, which is all about kindness in leadership and why kindness is a really underrated leadership trait. So if you want to check out the Kindness Happening, that's on Eventbrite. If you just go to eventbrite.com and just put in the Kindness Happening, you'll find out more. And we'd really love to have you to talk leadership and kindness in the new year. And if you want to find out more about Think Productive, those are the details on the screen. So let's get into some questions. We've got 10 minutes, and then we will by the way, just to say that Apple has just put the links to various things, the podcast and the Kindness Happening and stuff is in the chat if you want to check those out. We've got a couple of questions on the chat and also a couple on the Q&A. You can put your questions in either of those places and we will get to them. We're going to basically draw this to a formal close at 2:45, but we're going to hang around. So if we don't quite get to your question by 2:45, we will stay until they're all answered. So in our after dark section after 2:45, we'll stay around and do that. So let's see how many we can get through between now and then, Colette. So we got a question from Aidan at the top about omegas. So my question is about omegas. I'm vegetarian, so I think a lot about what I eat, getting balance, etc. How can I make sure I'm getting my omegas and in the right balance?
Great question. Thank you, Aidan. Yeah, and it's good that you're interested and aware of this, because there's omegas 3 and omega 6 and omega 9 and omega 7. There's lots of omegas, but the key ones for energy is omega 3. And we need this in a ratio of omega 3 to omega 6 of around 2 to 1 or even 1 to 1, some books say. So the issue that there is right at the moment is those oils that I talked about, those sunflower oils and the margarine, the hydrogenated oils, they're omega-6. So we don't need so much of this stuff because it's in everything. It's in our breads, it's in our biscuits, it's in our breakfast cereals, it's in our plant milks, there's sunflower oil in so many different things that we're getting a lot of this omega-6, which we do need. We just don't need it in that ratio, whereas we're not getting quite as much of the omega-3. So that's what you mean by the balance. So as a vegetarian, it's actually harder to get sources because it's generally most bioavailable in fish. So thinking about the oily fish, things like salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herrings, those kind of fish. So if you're not eating those, then as a vegetarian, you have to be more aware and eating them more often. There are lots of vegetarian sources of omega-3s. They're just not as absorbable by the body. So you have to eat them in larger quantities. And they're in things such as, so first of all, steer away from as much of those trans fats as possible, those hydrogenated oils, those omega-6. Check the ingredients to see if they're in some of the things that you're buying, Aidan. And then eating things like walnuts, flaxseed, chia seeds, dark green leafy vegetables, there's omega-3 in there, but also for vegetarians, a really good source is in dark green algae, so blue green algae, things like spirulina, which is a much more bioavailable source. So perhaps looking at a supplement of that as well, if you are concerned about that affecting your energy specifically. But steering away from the omega-6s first of all is going to help with that balance, and it won't be such an uphill struggle to get the omega-3s in them.
Yeah, chia seeds are amazing in terms of just the nutritional bang for buck of chia seeds. So you can buy them on Amazon in a huge big bag, and that just lasts you months and months and months. And then just being able to throw them into porridges, onto salads. Even just when I was doing marathon running and doing my training, I would put chia seeds just into a glass of water overnight, and then it kind of comes like frog spawn. It's a bit disgusting to neck it, but what you've then got is real hydration and loads of really good energy to support you as you're going out on a run. So really good energy source. And also, as we talk about in the book, you don't need to shy away from supplements as well. So having a good omega-3 supplement alongside those things that Colette suggested, just to help support you with those things.
I'd say a lot of people are deficient in omegas.
Yeah, for sure. And likewise, things like vitamin D. I mean, there's some talk about vitamin D right now around COVID, but because I get a lot of low moods and low energy, I have a vitamin D spray through the winter because I just know I'm going to get less from sunshine and things like that. So those things are really useful. Natalie asks, this is a really, really good question, really common question that we get, is how affordable is it to be label savvy? I think there is this sense that, eating fresh, can be expensive. There's a pressure often to eat everything organic. So yeah, what are your views on that, Colette?
So I would say, yeah, Natalie, great question as well. There's lots of things that you can do to lighten the load. Firstly, eating seasonal food, so when things are more plentiful. So right now, like things like leeks and stuff, you can get quite cheap. You can buy lots. You can make soups. You can make a frittata. You can braise them in the oven. So you'll kind of be eating what's around because you'll buy it a lot cheaper. The other thing is the freezer is your friend, tins are your friend. So in a lot of tins, you just turn around and there's only a couple of ingredients, maybe a brine and the bean or something like that. So you're not actually having to buy deli style olives that are £5 a punnet. You can just buy a tin of olives, which are £1. Also things that you think about being this label savvy as well. Porridge oats, again, for just about £1, you can get, depending on where you're buying them, from half a kilo to a kilo of porridge oats. That's a lot of breakfast. So if you compare that to one of these branded cereals that are kind of portion breakfast, which you tend to eat double of anyway, it's going to be cheaper. So I think
I'm a big fan of things like frozen spinach, frozen broccoli, tinned chickpeas, tinned kidney beans, all of these, really good sources of nutrition, really good sources of protein, in tin beans. And I think, again, we've been slightly conditioned to see anything in a tin as bad and anything in the freezer as bad. And actually, it's not the case. Sometimes with frozen vegetables, it's actually fresher to eat, and there's more nutrition in there than fresh, because it's frozen at source immediately as it's picked. And so it's in actually a really good state when it's frozen. So yeah, we need to kind of do away with some of these myths around food. There was a question in the chat earlier, Colette, which was, so is cold pressed oil okay to use?
Yes, so cold pressed oil is best used in salad dressings and things like that. So still, I would say that your olive oil is best, and your coconut oil. But if you do want to use a seed oil, like pumpkin seed oil or sesame seed oil, then you absolutely can. These add flavors and depth to different dishes. But you just wouldn't be cooking with those all the time. Avocado oil is another good one. So yeah, cold pressed is better, but the seeds do contain more of those omega-6s. So that's the thing that just to be aware of. Avocado oil is the exception, but it's also quite pricey. So when we're talking about being price conscious, that's more of a thing. But yeah, you can use those in smaller quantities. Yeah.
Cool. We're going to continue answering questions. I'm just going to, with a minute to go, just bring the formal part of the webinar to the close. And then if you want to stick around and hear your question answered, we will answer all of them. So just a reminder that we've got this final date next week for another one of these webinars. So do spread the word and get people to sign up. And we'd love you to pre-order the book. It really helps us with getting the book up those Amazon algorithm rankings so that when it comes out, Amazon thinks it's going to be a huge seller and it pushes it to more people. So it really helps us if you get on that pre-order, and don't wait around until it's out for 3 months. It would actually just means more to us if you can be on that pre-order list. So go and get the book. We're going to bring the formal part of things to a close just by saying thank you for spending 45 minutes of your very hard-pressed time. I know this is a very busy time of year. A lot of people are very frantically trying to make Christmas arrangements. And I know for myself, the barrage of text messages I'm getting from my school about things I need to take in for my son's school plays and everything else. Like, it just feels like there's a lot happening right now in the world. So thank you for being here as part of this part of our free webinar series at Think Productive. And join us on one of our future ones. We've got free webinars every single month. You can find out more at thinkproductive.co.uk. So thanks for being here. I'll stop the recording part right now, and
I'll start answering some of the questions.
We will continue on.
Yeah. So Corey, great question. Hopefully you're still around.